The hangman is often seen as a card of deep wisdom, and yet it remains one of the most unsettling cards in the tarot. Perhaps because the hangman does not promise that understanding will solve the pain. Instead, it asks us to do something much harder, to allow the pain to exist. The core of the hangman is not a stagnation. What stops is not the life itself, but the old logic, old pattern, old perspectives we once used to solve our problems. When we find ourselves in a hangman situation, it is often because the old understanding has already stopped working. Something about the old situation no longer feels right, and yet the new understanding has not fully formed. In that space, discomfort is almost inevitable. Reality itself is complex. It is rarely as simple as right or wrong. Sometimes we simply do not know what the right choice is. And for a while, the only thing we can do is remaining there, carrying the uneasy feeling of being caught between two directions. For example, in work, we might find ourselves in a job that does not truly align with what we want inside. It can feel draining, and yet at the same time, it provides the income that supports our life. The situation is rarely entirely bad. Sometimes there are still moments of achievement or a sense of competence. And after years of building experience in that direction, it may not be easy to imagine what else we could do. We may not even know how the things we truly enjoy could support our lives. Similar can happen in relationships. Sometimes we begin to notice problems in the structure of a relationship. Perhaps our values do not fully align. Perhaps the other people's personality or behavior causes us pain. In those moments, we may recognize that the relationship is not truly right for us, but at the same time, the emotional connection is still real. We may still get along very well, the bond is still there, and the love and the attachment are real too. So leaving would hurt, but staying may continue to drain us. And this is often the moment when we enter the landscape of the hangman. There is something important to notice here. What the hangman poses is not action, but the old understanding. So the hangman is not really stuck. It is a moment when we realize that the old way of understanding no longer works, and so we stop. Like last video discussed, it's not to escape reality, but to allow ourselves to see it as it truly is, without rushing to explain it through the old logic. And even after reality becomes clearer, in complex situations like the one we mentioned earlier, it may still take time before we can move forward, because the mind needs time to integrate what it sees. A new understanding has to slowly take shape inside us. And when the new understanding finally begins to appear, action often becomes clear on its own. When people move out of the hangman phase, they usually carry a new way of seeing things. In the examples we mentioned earlier, it might sound like this. The love was real, but the kind of life I truly need is something this person cannot give. Or perhaps, in the end, nothing matters more than love. Or, I'm willing to take the risk of having no income for a while in order to try a different life. And when that clarity appears, the hangman can finally come down from suspension. Besides, there is another layer I would like to share. Most of the situations we discussed earlier belongs to a certain kind of problem, that is, situation where an answer might eventually appear, or where a thing may become clearer over time. But not all questions in life work this way. Some questions may never reveal a final answer or reach a clear conclusion. In fact, some questions in life are fundamentally untestable, such as how long will this connection last? Or was this the best decision? These are not simply questions that have no answer yet. Sometimes the truth is that the answer may never be provable at all. In situations like this, the lesson of hangman is no longer about waiting for the truth to eventually reveal itself. Instead, it becomes about accepting that there may be no answer, and including this impermanence in the structure of life. If the idea of including impermanence in the structure of life sounds a little abstract or even cliche, we can look at a very direct example: intimacy relationships. To place impermanence in the background of the relationship means accepting something very simple. That is, if the connection has a beginning, it will eventually, definitely have an ending. The surface reason for that ending can take many forms. Love may fade, someone may fall in love with someone else, circumstances may change, or eventually there's death. But if we look beyond these surface reasons, the deeper structure is actually the same. At some point, the connection ends. So we're simply individuals who connect to each other for a while. And when loss becomes something inevitable, perhaps the focus changes. Instead of worrying how and when we might lose it, we might start to feel that the reality we share in the present moment matters more than the fear of losing it. So, going back to the story of the rabbit I shared in the previous video, imagine that when the rabbit came to have the moon, it also understood something that the moon wouldn't stay with it forever. Perhaps then it would worry less about when the loss might come or how it might happen. Instead, it might return to something much simpler. As long as it still loved the moon, and the moon was still there, it could simply cherish that connection. A connection now even deeper than before, and enjoy each evening they shared with each other. There's one more thing worth talking about is neither suspension nor accepting permanence removes the pain. Because we are human beings with bodies and nervous systems, attachment is a biological mechanism. Loss activates real pain circuits in the brain. Losing something hurts, and uncertainty creates anxiety. These reactions are completely natural. The handman does not eliminate the pain, it only offers a way of carrying it. The thing is, trying to control the future brings one kind of pain. Not trying to control the future brings another. The first is the anxiety of constantly predicting, running simulations again and again, borrowing pain from the future and imagination. The second is the feeling of insecurity and uncertainty, the experience of having to live alongside something unsure. Many times, pain cannot be removed. We simply choose which kind of cost we are willing to bear. And the pain that comes with the handman is in some way more real, because you are feeling the uncertainty that actually exists in reality, rather than suffering in wounds from countless disasters imagined by the mind. There's a lyric from a song by a Chinese band called Dodo, titled "What Can I Use to Keep You?" One line goes roughly like this: because we enjoy its brilliance, and because we endure its decay, you see we shouldn't love, and yet we cannot let go. In many ways, this is exactly how life feels. We immerse ourselves in the beauty of people and things we love, while knowing at the same time that none of it can truly be kept. The handman does not try to make things permanent. The handman simply learns how to love something that will change. In the end, I want to share a small reflection from my time working the Camino de Santiago. Sometimes, the few weeks we spend on Camino feels like a small version of life itself. It has a beginning and it has an end, but what happens each day is unknown. Along the way, I kept meeting new people. In ordinary life, because time stretches so far into the future, we often feel it's as if certain people or thing might stay with us forever. But when life is compressed into a journey or of just a few weeks, something becomes clearer. In that small window of time, it feels easier to see that we are simply individuals who connect to each other for a while. By the way, this is also a phrase that I learned from a friend I met on the Camino. As a solo traveler, most of the time I work alone. Sometimes I work with someone for a while, maybe a few minutes, maybe a few days. Some people you met again later on the road. Others are just a brief encounter. You work together for a short stretch, say goodbye, and never see each other again. And strangely, because we already know that the moment of parting will come, we often cherish the time we share even more. Because the journey is shorter, the ending feels more visible. And in that way, it also becomes easier to accept that everything eventually ends, and that, in the end, we each return to ourselves. Perhaps that is why the pain of uncertainty and impermanence becomes a little easier to carry in a short journey. Life, of course, is much longer and more complicated than a few weeks on the Camino, but perhaps the way we understand it does not have to be so different. When I was working the Portuguese road of the Camino, I finished reading Young Matthew's The High Mountain of Portugal. In the book, there is a man who experienced a profound personal loss, and from that moment on, he decides to work everywhere backwards. Perhaps he chose to work this way out of anger, or out of a deep doubt towards the belief he once held. I won't go too deeply into the story here, But when I read that part, it immediately reminded me of the hangman. That moment when the old beliefs stop working, when he no longer knows how to move forward into the future, and when the answer has not yet appeared. In that kind of moment, choosing to reverse one's perspective, allowing oneself to live for a while from a different angle, suddenly begins to make a strange kind of sense. One interesting thing is, during my Camino work, there was a road with many downhills. Walking downhills can be quite hard on knees, and another friend I met on the trail suggested that I try walking backwards. It would put less pressure on the knees. So I decided to try it. But after working that way for a short while, I suddenly remembered the man in the story of the high mountains of Portugal. I also noticed that the landscape looked quite different when seeing it in reverse. Even the feeling of working was different. In that moment, the hangman was no longer just an idea of a state of mind. It became something physical, something I could experience with my body. And that is a small moment of seeing the world from an inverted perspective.